2, 1. Okay. Bandwidth permitting. Here we are. And we're going to hang off for a second. We're not going to start the CapmLew portion of this on the podcast because we're just getting warmed up. It's a little early in the day for us. We're not going to disclose what time it is. It's probably in the metadata. There are no secrets there. What is it, like 11? Yeah,
it's 11:30.
Like 11:30. Yeah. Today is, what day is it?
Friday.
Oh, it's up at the top right there. Friday, November 25th. Day after Thanksgiving.
Indeed.
Did you have a happy?
It was nice. I hung out with you. It was perfect.
Oh yeah, we had a couple of shindigs over here at the place. This place is hopping, busy. So, Luke and I were just actually. I'm going to go ahead and start the Podbean. Okay, so the device tells me that the Podbean recording has begun. This is the CapmLew podcast.
Yes.
With me, your host, CapmLew.
Yes.
And also your host,
Luke
Coffee.
Yes,
that's right. Me. So we were just sitting here because I've got probably 3 times as much of these 1980-81 Topps baseball cards, and we were just farting around looking up what they're worth because they just sit here. They're not terribly bad condition, but they're certainly not good condition. And we were like, I don't know. So we just gave up on it. and we were like, oh, try and sell them one at a time, try and do this, try and do that. And, we're trying to do so many things all the time that I don't want to try to do anything else right now.
Yes.
We have at our feet young Rocco, the dog, and he is sighing with self-pity. Maybe we'll bring him up. Come here, Rocco. You want to meet your public? No, these two cuddled.
Yeah.
Sorry, folks.
Sorry.
We're gonna try and, I don't know. We'll try into something for
like
you
make
guys
a bed
to get
behind
more
us
Rocco.
or something.
Yeah, like literally on-level bed.
Like a cat.
I just can't do it, man. I can't do it. I just want to spoil my dog so bad. He's such a good dog.
Resist the urge.
He's 12 now.
Yes.
And
much more chill.
He's doing well. Judy's been feeding him good food, and she kind of bounced him back.
Yeah. Okay.
All right, and the other thing we were talking about was like theme music and fancy stuff. I'm just not feeling it. One of these days, I probably will write a CapmLew thing, but I just can't do it again. I was like, oh, CapmLew theme song. This is the theme song to CapmLew, yeah.
Right, you're at the CapmLew thing.
And I don't know. But I spitballed a bunch of silly jingles for a company that will remain unnamed. And they went and they actually did a studio version.
Yes.
Not of anything I did.
Yes.
Not of anything I did.
Using your conceptuals, though, I think.
I don't think so.
Really?
I think I was using their... Don't say
Oh,
pollution.
my bad,
They'll
dog.
figure it out.
Okay.
But we'd like to say welcome to our Facebook Live, folks. We're doing an hour today, and we're trying to continue our series where we give our listeners a chance to get to know us.
Yes.
Because we are, and so what we've got is we've got a Facebook Live that's running, but we also have a nicely mic'd version of this on the CapmLew podcast, which is CapmLew Podbean. It's linked in this video.
Yes.
And we'd love it if you went and listened to it over there. It will be on Apple Podcasts sometime. They take a very long time to, approve your podcast. We can see some of you guys scaling up in the bottom there. We're really happy you've joined us. We also tend to figure out how to do it again every time and put these live videos onto the CapmLew YouTube. So if you want to enjoy the CapmLew podcast on YouTube, but we usually tend to cut out the Facebook Live after 15, 20 minutes.
Yeah.
The last couple times we've just gone ahead and gone long form on it.
Yeah.
But we ran into some trouble because it took like days and days and days for the Facebook Live to act right. And honestly, I have no complaints about that. It's fine. But what are we doing, Luke?
Well,
Luke is actually in charge. It's true.
Jeez.
Luke sits down and figures out what we're doing, and then we sort of get into it.
Well, we're in the early days right now. From here to the end of the year will now be forever called the early days. So we're in the early days. Last time we did a episode 1 Lew history.
So when we say early days, we're actually doing background.
Yes.
Who are these guys?
Yes.
And I think this will help set the expectation of what a person might come here to get.
Yes. Yes.
A lot of people know me as a skateboard maker, a deck maker. Other people know me as a rider of a stable of motorcycles, and other people have met me as a mechanic at the bike shop.
Yep.
And thanks to Brad at the bike shop for these awesome bike shop shirts, which he allowed me to keep. I don't know if I have quit the bike shop. Can you really quit the bike shop?
Yes.
There's a lot of love in the house there, and huge appreciation on my behalf to Brad for his generosity and kindness, and taking me under his wing at the bike shop and I don't know, I think he'd be fine with me saying after I'd been there about a year, he was like, "You are a mechanic." He said it, like, "You are a mechanic, not a tech. Not by a long stretch a tech, but I'm a bike mechanic." It has been said of me by a guy who I came to really trust as knowledgeable and experienced, and I'm very happy for it. Would I like to be a tech? I don't know about a career in motorcycle repair. I like motorcycle repair.
Yes.
But the resources so you might know me from skateboarding, you might know me from motorcycle stuff, but the early days series, we want to give you guys a baseline on kind of who we are, or if someone comes in later and they're listening to the podcast and they're like, "Who are these guys? What's their deal, man?" You know, maybe they might want to go back and you're a mensch.
Thank you, Sam.
He left the S out. It's mensch. You're a mensch. Mensch. So work on your Yiddish, man. So we don't know if we'll pin these or whatnot, but they'll always be there.
Yeah.
You know, for when they come to collect people, they can go back and find these records of us and collect us up and cart us off for not being enough this or being too much that or whatever's whatever, man. You know.
Fine.
So we started these. What are we calling it? The early what?
The early days, man.
Okay.
The early days, and we did one on Tuesday,
and it covered me up to 15 years old.
Yeah, that was you moving to New York.
And these are perspectives.
Yeah.
These are not the story.
Right.
These are just like little perspectives on what it was. And at 15 years old, I think we ended with me being. I had talked about how much I love and appreciate my parents, and what a warm and good relationship we have. And when I was young, I was kind of a POS, and I was not I wasn't turning out right, and I was on a bit of a wrong track just in terms of like nowadays, I would have been certifiable, and I did at 15 years old. I did get sent home from school because I was considered a danger to others. I was super stressed about something very serious that I'd gotten involved with. I don't want to go into it, the ugly details. Stories about your life are difficult because they don't always reflect well on other people. Yeah. But this didn't reflect well on me. And so I went in my guidance counselor's office and I was super stressed. You know what? I'm conflating this. Maybe I was in that guidance counselor's office a few times to talk through a few things that were going on because I was on shaky ground. I had this concept of rage and intensity that I wanted to live by. Yeah. I was a young martial artist. I was learning. I was coming from a place of being a very sensitive kid into a relatively harsh world. I found the world to be quite harsh in the 1980s, growing up in the Hudson Valley of New York, in a very, metro or cosmopolitan area. We had a lot of the world in our area. We had IBM blowing up. We had the invention of the personal computer blowing up. Yeah. And my dad and my brother were, Frankie Wallace, thanks for saying that that our first episode was a good listen. That means a lot to a guy.
Yeah, it does. Yeah, thank you.
We felt good after making it, and that's so far. We're flying by instruments, and sometimes we have to just make what we feel good about. But enough podcasting about podcasting.
Yeah.
So at 15 years old, I was running into a bit of a mess, and and I was surrounded by a social environment was very, in my opinion, it's a fairly aggressive Hudson Valley, New York culture.
Yeah.
I lived kind of isolated because we were in a stripe that was filling up with New York City, but it was rural. And so you had you had rich kids that lived, and they were kids. We were kids, right? I don't mean any hate toward the rich kids, but they lived in kind of these neighborhoods up in the mountains. We had mountains, and I lived 20 minutes from everyone, an hour from everyone type of feeling. My bus ride in the mornings was an hour and 15 minutes or an hour and a half long during certain years. And at 15, my brother was old enough to drive me to school, but then he went to college. I was not thriving.
Yeah.
I was just not thriving. And the kind of friends that I attracted to myself, I had to take responsibility for the way I lived. Someone else said it made me reflect on the challenges of life in the 80s in the Northeast. There were many, lots of them. Class divide. Yeah,
Yes.
The class divide was real. And I'm not griping about it because what happened with me was that, I don't know how old I was, but I had shared in our last episode how I had been at some point given a copy of the Bible. It was just a New Testament, and it was huge. It was like a giant encyclopedia with full-page pictures, and it was the Good News translation, which is, you can tell by the translation that it's got soft wording in it and stuff. But in Matthew 5, we looked at it last week, I learned that the fundamental nature of me was bad. That I was a bad person. And it was really productive for me because it did not look productive because by mid 15 years old, I was really on a bad track mentally. And violence, anger, sexual appetite were all like front of the pack leading in me. But also a heavy amount of disillusionment because I was a very sensitive person. I was very frustrated because friends, girlfriends, all this stuff going on was really bewildering to me. My parents had raised me, to their credit, with a sense of, I don't think they ever used the word, but decency. They raised me with a sense of decency and kind of an ethical background. And I was having trouble finding placement for that in the world around me. The world around me was pretty savage. And skateboarding had hit me at about 12 years old as a really independent thing. And the blowing up in the 80s skateboarding culture and I did not get along. And so I had these points of like divide with the world around me where I didn't like the flashy poser style skateboarding stuff, dress like you live in California when you really live in Hudson Valley, New York, and it is freaking cold all the way till May. And so you're never going to get good because you skate in freezing cold temperatures. You're just punished every minute for probably from November, December, January, February, March, and April. That's 6 months of the year. You're just punished by wet, cold, snow. And like shoes are expensive and I didn't have a lot of money. There was a class divide. My parents, who are both highly educated people, lived lower class. That is, that they were really conservative, humble in the way that they handled money. They weren't misers, but they knew that there were things you didn't need. So a lot of the toys and things that my other friends had, you can see I got that Darth Vader thing back there. That was a Christmas gift when I was a kid. And there's a mess of Star Wars figures down there that I had when I was a kid. But my prizes are up a little higher.
Don't do it.
They are. Oh, you're right. I shouldn't mess with it. If I touch it, it'll be bad. But for the Facebook viewers, they got the treat.
Yes.
But angry, frustrated.
Did it feel like the trajectory that you were on? Did it feel like it was compounding, like interest compounds? Like did it feel like it was just going faster and faster, like a snowball down?
You know what movies we grew up on was Porky's.
Ugh.
Revenge of the Nerds.
Yeah.
They were all movies about getting laid. They were all movies about this type of thing, and it was always about like that.
Yeah.
And at 15 years old, I'd been messing around in some of that stuff, like as a kid growing up where I was, the big boys, the 17-year-olds and 18-year-olds had built like these forts out in the woods, and then they're full of porn, and they'd go out there and smoke pot and look at porn and like that, and it was pretty grimy. It was pretty grimy scene, and us little kids would go out there. So 11 years old or so, started the seeing your first porn and not knowing what you're looking at, and it's also biological and weird and like that. Shits and giggles, to you when you're a little kid.
Right.
Also dreadfully fascinating. And then you got these movies, and you're growing up on these movies, and so we were just like wheat for the reaper,
Yeah.
And then you start tangling around with some of these relationships with girls, and I made a terrific mess of that.
Yeah.
That was never going to go well. I was not. It just, man, like as a kid, you're not well.
Yeah.
When you're involved in that sort of stuff, you're in a culture that pushes you toward very adult things. There's not a lot of supervision going on, and it's hard. It's hard to tell your story because it doesn't always reflect well on the people around you. But my parents were doing the best they could with what they knew to raise me.
Yeah.
And you know what? The other parents around me, I mean, I had friends who had, in retrospect, they had kind of cocaine party parents, 1970s disco era cocaine party parents, and their houses were so fun to go over to.
Right.
It was so much more live where they were. My parents were my dad is he's really a big scientist, but he's a really down to earth person. And he didn't go the academic route. He was a working scientist, so he had a job, and he was gone a lot. My mom was a school teacher, and then she had us, and she raised us. And I think that it was terrifically burdensome to have two little boys and be married. I think it's hard. I think marriage is super, super hard. And
Indeed.
Both of my parents are now kicking at 80 and stayed together.
Yeah.
And I have a huge respect because during that generation, there was a huge amount of folks who just did not pull off that trick.
Yeah.
And I appreciate that very much.
Yeah. Were you guys were you going out and smoking ciggies and pot and getting into the drugs in that time as well?
Good question.
Yeah.
I escaped the drug thing.
Okay.
Because there were two influences I had in my life. One was martial arts.
Oh yeah.
I was terrifically serious about martial arts.
Yeah.
And the other was the arrival of New York hardcore.
Oh yeah.
The
New
New York hardcore straight edge scene was really impactful to me. I was very young, and I took it for a year or two. I took it pretty seriously. That since I was already karate,
right.
I was going to go ahead and piggyback some of that on there, and it broke for me. I ditched straight edge, having tried to go vegan and like that. When I read one of the flyers that was passed out, I wasn't going to hardcore shows as a kid. I tried to catch a hardcore show, but we got lost and just skated instead. I was so young. I was 15.
Yeah.
And those guys were 18, 19, 20. They had mobility, and they lived in places where you could jump, in New York City.
Right.
For me, the city was, I had to drive to a train station. I had to be driven to a train station, catch a train, and then take a half-hour train ride. So it took an hour for me to get to the city. And as a 15-year-old kid who lived on a horse farm in the sticks, that was big. I only went to the city a few times, unknown to my parents. I was not I always went with kids who were 2 years older than me.
Right.
I was a little kid, but I was a sensitive kid, and I was a somewhat intelligent kid, and I knew, to some extent, that this is shaky ground, but what other ground are you going to get on?
Right.
But New York hardcore and karate made me very, very averse to drugs because I didn't want to do things that would weaken the sharpness that I was relying on.
Yeah.
I wanted to be able at all times to respond with acuity and aggression to my environment.
Yeah.
Those were what I valued. 15, 16. 15 was a mess. 16, I was getting sharp.
Yeah.
The problem was that the same, and I'm kind of underplaying some of it, but the thing about that sharpness was that I started to lose control. And I did tell a story in the last episode about losing control of this rage and anger, coupled with all the training that was going in. You know, I was hitting year 4 of training 4 days a week.
Yeah.
And then the skateboarding was really frustrating.
Yeah.
You had what I used to call poser culture, which was pressuring you to wear the right thing and be like that. But I started skateboarding because I no longer had to wear the right thing.
Right.
And hip hop was blowing up all around us, and hip hop was a very face culture. I'm better than you. I'm better than you. And you got these guys coming into skateboarding who were not surf and punk. They were face and puff and bluster.
Yeah.
And they were mean.
Yeah.
They were really mean.
Right.
And they were savage. But you liked them too, because the meanness that they had was universal aggression.
Yeah.
There was an honesty to the New York meanness that I grew up with, because the guy's being aggressive to you, and like being intimidating toward you, and that's scary. And I was 3 years younger than all these guys. That's a real big difference.
Yes.
Remember, last episode I talked about getting my my cheekbone cracked, and my eye swelled shut for 3 days as a 5th grader, because a guy 2-3 years older than me, bigger than me, just let me have it. And was I asking for it? What fifth grader is asking for a facial bone fracture, man?
What were you wearing?
Right.
What were you wearing, Lou?
You know.
Yeah, jeez.
And sure, plenty to blame. Had a big mouth, and I picked on bullies. That's a fact. But and that's not the only story. I maybe I'll write a book someday and talk about like all the times I got my ass handed to me by guys both bigger and smaller.
Yeah, dude.
I got concussed. I got my collarbone broken. I got a tooth broken. I got my facial bone cracked, nerve damage in my eye. You know, it was like this for a long time. You know, and more. I had hands broken from trying to punch before I knew how. I had multiple hand breaks.
Yeah.
Because I was a crappy little kid.
You were in it.
And my parents, God bless them today, they were trying so hard to raise me nonviolent.
Right.
And it was a very tough and long learning curve for us as a family.
Right.
How to raise a sensitive, intuitive, artistic kid as people who didn't know how to raise those.
Yeah.
And I think that things turned out really well. I do. I think they did. And I don't think any of us get a lot of credit for it. It's not that I'm unwilling to give credit to my parents. I'll give my mom and my dad credit every day for doing the very best they could.
Yeah.
But what had happened was... I was dying inside. I had tried all the stuff that everyone says you're supposed to be trying. I had become aggressive. I had become capable of exerting my force with people. I had kind of achieved a personality, and go ahead.
Well, I was just wondering, like, all of that in effort to figure out how to interact with the world, like in general.
Try and learn how to live. I had begun to seek knowledge in Taoism, because that fit with the martial art I was in.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know that my martial art was Taoist per se, but Taoism was a study as a 15-year-old kid that I was interested in, because there just has to be a way.
Yeah.
Right. And I thought that Taoism was cool because they had this the Tao Te Ching, that you read, and it's full of pithy sayings.
Right.
And pithy sayings were a language I could understand as a kid. And also I was learning the way to like, I thought then life must be like learning how to snap on a punch, must be like that, like learning how to deliver, least effort, most result.
Right.
That fit in my, and skateboarding was more of a venting for the other side of my personality, the more chaotic aspect of being a kid. The artistic side of me didn't get a lot of nurture in martial arts, and that was my main thing for so long. Skateboarding gave me a place to be. They started calling me, I was known among some people as Crazy Lou.
Really?
He would show up at your session wherever this grimy little low-level, low-talent session was going on.
Right.
I didn't skate with the big boys. I skated with second string.
Yep.
And I'd show up and just be crazy and aggressive and just dumb. I was a dumb kid.
Yeah.
And but I'd show up and just put a huge amount of personality out and aggress and yell and scream and do stuff. And I don't think I was a really fun kid to be around. I don't know.
I'm interested in your motivation to like maybe get into Taoism or even to get into martial arts. Like, what was the? Could you simmer down like an overarching motivation to like even channel anger or be into martial arts real heavy or be into Taoism? Like, what is it that you felt like you were trying to figure out or do? You know,
I felt lost. I felt as a kid. I remember a huge sense of loneliness, alienation.
Yep.
I felt fundamentally at all times like something is wrong. Something's wrong with the world around me. It doesn't act right. It doesn't do right.
Right.
Saying kids are mean.
Right.
That wasn't it. There were, to me, ever since I was little, about the fourth grade, whatever part of my brain it is, kind of that unset Jello mold starts to harden. I got this sense that like, man, it's just not right.
Right.
All the pig, dogs eat dogs and the pigs get all the corn, man. Like, it's like just what in the world is going on down here? How does any of this work? And that's like as a fourth grader.
Yeah.
And then trying like pop music and like romance and all that stuff seemed like, that was the direction of culture. Everything was love songs and all that.
Right.
But the world was savage, man. It was savage. And then like, if you try to stick up for someone or try and stick up for yourself, I got thrown in a garbage can. Well, not thrown in a garbage can. I got pushed into a garbage can with my knees up and my back in there like that.
Dude.
Everyone laughing. I got in the first grade, I got the bathroom door had no lock in the back of the classroom, and someone opened the door to the bathroom while I was on the pot. And the kids in the classroom, the person who opened the door immediately covered their mouth and went, "Oh," like that.
Savage.
And the whole class turned around and I'm on the pot. These were formative experiences that a lot of us share.
Right.
And I just, coming up into my mid-teen years,
right.
15, 16, I was a mess, and I'd tried girls, and I didn't want to do any drugs. I wanted to be sharp. I wanted to be crisp.
Right.
And I was talented in martial arts, and I was like wearing combat boots all the time, and I could kick as fast as people could punch, and I loved it. I loved the sense of a superpower that you have.
Yeah.
I never kicked anyone in the face. I never had a fight with someone where I kicked them in the face, but the fact that I could and that I was ready to caused my experience of fighting with people to change.
Yeah.
I remember there was a guy who, ever since I was little, he was older than me by like 3 years, my perception. This guy had man muscles.
Yeah.
Like 3 years ahead of me. He was maybe 2 years ahead of me in school.
Yeah.
This guy, he picked on me every time he saw me, like out in the world. One time he swerved a car at me.
Oh my God.
Oh, he opened the door as a car. He was riding in a car. He opened the door to like hit me with the door.
Oh my gosh,
I was walking with my skateboard on the road. You'd be walking with your skateboard and have a bottle thrown at you.
Dude, that's insane, bro.
I'm trying to describe.
Nuts, bro. Yeah.
I'm trying to describe what it was like growing up in New York and like being skateboarding was nothing like. It wasn't even a subculture. It was like we were trying this skateboarding thing in an area where, and a time in which it was a real stepping outside of the norms. The norms, though, sucked. They were awful. I hated the norms. I didn't want to be. School was pure torture. Yeah. And like my brother is a sensitive and he's a good dude.
Yeah.
I am like friends with my brother, and he got along with the system when he was young. I don't think his story would be too different from mine if he told it, though.
Yeah.
Because feeling lost, he had it too.
Right.
But he processed it differently. He cooperated with the system and did really well in school, and thereby got along well with my dad. My dad was a guy, and he did kind of my dad's school of thought.
Yeah.
And to their credit, to a degree, blending in, finding a place within the existing rubric, within the existing structure, find a place within that, occupy that place, not another one.
Yeah.
And you try not to make waves or piss anyone off.
Right.
Well, I was like, no, I want to do things. And if I see a system where if you piss it off, it's going to crush you.
Right.
I'm like, well, then get it over with. As a kid, like, here, this will help explain some of my framework.
Yeah.
My brother and I would both come home from school and want a snack, and my parents were very modest with the way that we did things financially. So we didn't have some of my friends would come home and they would have whatever snacks they wanted to.
Right.
And my parents didn't want us to get out, out of shape and have bad health. So we didn't have like Little Debbie's and stuff in the house. My mom would buy cookies.
Okay.
And you could have 2 cookies after school, and that's a good rule.
Yeah, that's fine. Right.
And then there'd be other foods that you could have. Well, every now and then my brother and I would steal an extra cookie, but my brother would always steal 1 extra cookie.
Right.
And he could always count on me.
Yeah.
Because I'd come after my brother and I'd steal 6 extra cookies. I would eat cookies until I was tired of eating them. Because I didn't feel good about stealing them.
Yeah, so you just hammered on down.
And when I hammered down like that, I thought, well, instead of just feeling bad and having 1 cookie, which isn't enough, I'm going to feel bad the same amount and have like 8 cookies.
Right.
And I carried that in my life. That was and I think that would come out in a personality or a temperament test.
Yeah.
And show that I'm not that rare a bird.
Right.
You know? But that was the way I viewed the structures around me. Of like, well, if I'm not going to be good, then I may as well be honest.
Right.
And that way, even though I don't have a clear conscience, I don't have 2 layers to my conscience.
Yeah.
So like I didn't wear a fake face. I was pretty shitty.
Right.
And it really showed in my home life. We're terrible to our moms during a certain time of our life, most young men. And my brother and I were pretty terrible, but I was terrible to my mom.
Yeah.
And that's not good.
No.
And she knows. We've talked. We're square. And she's hep to the game, man. She's a cool lady, and she gets it. But that was kind of, I felt lost.
Yeah.
And I was trying things because all you had as a kid, growing up the way I was you had like trial and error with what you're given.
Right.
And having read the words of Jesus in Matthew 5, I knew I was wicked. I knew it.
Right.
And I was processing the idea that, well, if you're a bad person and you do bad things and you admit it, that's almost like best possible. Yeah. I was also a sensitive person, and I didn't want to do certain things anymore because I saw they destroyed me.
Right.
And in the middle of this, there was this sort of gasping thing, and I had mentioned in the last podcast about my very sensitive friend, Hindu, intelligent, very good guy.
Yeah.
And we were talking about God, and he had sort of, because we both had this sort of universalistic understanding that if there's a God, he must understand, because boy, are we in a mess.
Yeah.
And there must be a way.
Right.
There must be a way that we can find through this.
Right.
And it must be okay in the end. And so, I was thrashing around, and I was doing well in martial arts competitions, but the whole mental health of the place I trained at was descending. Our instructor, who was under this Korean colonel who had come to America after the war, in retrospect, our instructor was losing his mind.
Poor guy.
He was completely consumed with kind of the exact same stuff I was consumed with, but he was older than me, and he had made his bed, and he was having to sleep in it.
That's rough, dude.
Yeah, he did. He wound up, God bless him, he wound up committing suicide.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
Like pretty soon after you knew him?
Oh, I don't know what year it was. It was, I had already gotten married by that time, I think. I really dipped out. After I was 18, I dipped out of martial arts.
Yeah.
Because they were so much part of the development of anger and power.
Right.
And I came off that because of something that happened. My mom was really pissed about this. There were periods of my life during which my mom would take me to this Methodist church. Mom has always maintained a connection to her roots and the Methodist Church.
Yeah.
And I've always appreciated that she had kind of that within her, like that she gravitates, she wants to go to church, wants to sing in a choir. So there were periods of my life during which I was kind of dragged to church. But it wasn't serious. I had serious questions. I'll tell you this. My experience of that never had a huge, any sort of real interaction with the deeper. But that Methodist church for like 5 or 6 years, they had this like week-long thing where we went to a vacation area and stayed there and did little service projects and got to hang out on the beach and stuff like that. So this was a component in my formation.
Yeah.
It was not theological and it was not spiritual. It was about learning how to talk to girls. It was about learning how to be in a group.
Yeah.
And I was really behind. I was really not well adjusted. Part of it was living in isolation and not doing like team sports and doing some of the normal stuff that my friends did, not living in a neighborhood. I didn't live in a neighborhood. I lived on a farm. And the other part was being a quirky, I was just socially an idiot, and I felt terrible. I probably was clinically depressed. I felt terribly sorry for myself. I had a huge amount of self-pity that served to distort everything that's going on into some story about me.
Right.
I was a kid.
Right.
That's not rare.
Right.
And I didn't have a tight deal with my dad at the time. And there were reasons for that I appreciate to this day about my dad.
Yeah.
They'll probably be in my book or some recordings I won't release. But I'll tell you, my dad has emerged in my life as a bit of an example of a person who really made some hard calls and really lived them.
Yep.
Man, if you figure out where someone comes from and you look into why they made the mistakes they made, you start to look at their mistakes in a whole different light.
Yes.
And it was pretty nuts for me when I got an adult view of the things my dad was handling. And I looked at it and I was like, I call my dad every few years and just go, man, Dad, I'm this old, and like your tactic on that, man, was just as solid as a person could do in that situation. Like that was solid. My dad was tactically moving to keep me and my brother in a good place. That's all I'm going to say about it right now. Yeah. It's weird when you get podcasting. Isn't it?
I know, dude, because that's such a good story. We'll get into it at some point. Yeah, insane. Yeah. We'll get into it.
It includes freaking
like and subscribe.
Death penalties. Yeah, like and subscribe. We put it behind a paywall.
Yeah, seriously. You're going to have to pay for that one, boys.
I don't know.
So how did it coalesce?
Dude, we went to that church one time. We came out, and there was, I don't have one here, but
what is it?
They are legendary. It was a chick tract.
Tracks. Yeah, dude, so sick.
It was a chick tract. Right. I don't know if my listeners know what a chick tract is, but this is back in the day, 1970s and 80s, when the Christians used to do street evangelism. Yeah. They'd go out and they would talk to people. And, I guess it's still going on now. It's not something I see a lot of.
Right.
And I'm on the streets and I talk to people and I share where I'm at and what God's done in my life with people. But it was like you would give them a tract. And these tracts, that's a little booklet. Right. They were like little booklets.
Right.
And every one of them goes through some story. And at the end, they have the faceless God sitting on a throne and this judgment scene.
Yeah.
And you have this like, person is either forgiven and receives like heaven, or they like are condemned and they go, and it shows them going into the flames.
Yeah,
These tracts are very intense.
Yeah.
The name of this tract, I remember it. I don't know what age I was. This really got to me because I had learned that I was a sinner.
Right.
I was bad. That my base nature was evil.
Yeah.
And I had come to a place of acceptance that this is either my plight to be forgiven of, and somehow this just has to be okay. Because I also had an operative functioning sense that if we were the creation of a creator, that I was a kid, I was really young, but I was like, his fingerprint has to be love. If there's really a God, the one common denominator Because some people really hate. They really do the murdering and the genociding thing.
Right.
But everybody wants, needs, has to be loved.
Yeah.
And this coalesced through, again, these are just overall perspectives, but this, by the time I was 16 years old, I was shifting from Taoism and rage as a way and aggression as a foundation into really beginning to recognize that love is like, all right.
Yes.
But before that,
Right.
I read this chick tract.
Yes.
And my mom was heated. It was called Reverend Wonderful.
Yes.
And in this tract, it just page to page,
Yeah.
tells a story about this preacher.
Yeah.
And this preacher, everyone loves him, and he's rich. He's got all this stuff.
Yeah.
And everyone loves him and speaks well of him. And of course, he's a total shank.
Yeah, right.
And in his real life, he's lascivious and greedy and power hungry. And I was like, and I didn't even know about preachers like that as a kid. The most you'd see was like maybe Jimmy Swaggart would be on Sunday mornings, but we didn't watch that crap.
Yeah,
you know, we didn't watch that crap in my house. You know, freaking Hanna-Barbera. You know, and so, and then there's this guy, and he's like this blue collar wash up dude, and he's in his truck, and he's like, or his car, and he's like, Lord, please guide me. I know you want me to share your good message with someone.
Yes.
And I trust you to guide me. And he's like driving. Yeah. And it's like page to page. It goes back and forth between these two. And this guy is just a schlub.
Yeah.
But he loves God, and he thinks the Holy Spirit is like leading him. And he gets a red light, so he takes a right turn, you know? And he's like trying to follow the leading and voice of God. And I was like, okay. You know, like I'm the guy that a Ouija board would start moving when I walk in a room. You know, I know about, I had a sense for occult power.
Yeah.
And I had a sense for being led by spirits.
Right.
And I was like, this guy is doing what we do when we're using divination.
Right.
You know, but he's got God on the line. And so what this guy winds up doing is he pulls his car over and he walks up to the preacher guy who's in between things and like that. And the preacher was doing something nasty, I think.
Yeah.
He was just in his like regular clothes.
Yeah.
And this humble dude walks up to the preacher and he's like, hey man, I just want to share with you that God will forgive you all this evil you do. And the guy turns to him, he's like, do you know who I am? I'm this special person, that special person. I'm Reverend Wonderful. Everyone knows I'm a good person.
Right.
And so the guy, you know, gets back in his car and he's like, Lord, please help him. He just keeps going on his
so sick.
On his like scroungy humble.
Yeah.
And Reverend Wonderful gets in his car and he gets hit by a train or something, you know.
Dang, dude.
Enter the faceless judgment scene. God on a throne with his hands on his knees. And he's got no face. And it's all radiant, you know. Right. And he throws Reverend Wonderful into the fire and he says to him something like, I tried to show you the way to know me is first to receive my forgiveness for all the wickedness that's in you. Now, I know that that's not an attractive message to a lot of people, but let me tell you, dude, as a little kid reading that tract, and wondering why my mom was so mad was because I was like,
oh shit,
Mom, I think I need this. And she said, and she was well-intentioned because she wanted to keep me away from the Fruit Loops. She goes, that's the born-agains. You want to stay as far away from them as you can. I don't know if she said it that way, but that's the way I heard it. She's like, they think God will give them money for changing people's minds.
Yeah, of course.
You know, and they think God rewards them for changing people's minds, and the more people they get, the more rewards they get.
Right.
And that sounded, terrible enough to me as a little kid, and I could see my mom was really angry. I think I was quite young when I found that tract.
Yeah.
But it was banging around in there with the words of Jesus in Matthew 5, which had convinced me that I was fundamentally evil. Right. And so I like this because it was coalescing for me. Oh, by the way, for those of you who are joining us, all this entire conversation is going to be on the CapmLew podcast linked in here. So, but what I didn't go in for it. You know, I was warned off of it, and I didn't go in for it. But I got up around 16 years old, and I started connecting the dots because I was losing my sanity on anger and power.
Right.
And I was going, you know what? The real power is love.
Hmm.
I started to philosophically apprehend that the real power is love.
Yeah.
And I had been exposed to the philosophy of Leo Buscaglia, who did the first PhD level or pre-grad level or whatever study on love in history in America, whatever.
Yeah.
And I started, and I was getting busted.
Yeah.
And my mom was part of that. You know, she was part of that conversation and really, really helpful. My mom always tried to take care of me. She was sensitive like I was sensitive. And she had trouble finding her way in the world like I had trouble finding my way in the world. And so my mom and I were pretty tight. But also those teen years hit, and also I hated my mom because young men tend to resent their moms.
Yeah.
It is a developmental thing, and it's important for a dad to step in my opinion.
Yeah.
It's important for a dad to step in and stabilize respect and love for the mom.
Yeah.
And also nurture independence and capability as a man. And my dad and I just weren't there. You know, my dad wasn't at that place, and I wasn't at that place. And but I was starting to discover that love must be a thing.
Yeah.
And I had several experiences over a period of time, like a 3-month period of time, that were really formative experiences. And I'd like to talk about those at length in this format, maybe in the next episode, because we have about 15 minutes left of this one, and we're not against taking a pee break and then coming back and doing another episode for you guys.
I'm still interested, I'm still interested, in what the coalescence was. Like, was there a point where you were like, holy shit, this is just not working anymore? Or was it like a slow burn?
Dude, I had crisis points from 14 to 16.
Okay, like multiples.
I'd been skating with guys in their 20s. I'd been going out and getting in this mob of weekend skating with guys who were older than me. Not a lot. I mean, I didn't live in that area. It was a half an hour away from me, but I started to get to that area on the weekends. And like one time one thing, I didn't do drugs.
Right.
But I did whippets, because whippets are not drugs.
Was that a thing, really? That was like, you could be straight edge and do a whippet. That's
no,
cool.
I was not straight edge at that point. Skateboarding, the chaotic aspect of skateboarding began to overtake me in around my 16th year.
Yeah.
And that was, I realized when I started doing whippets, I said, oh, I'm on the way to die from heroin, period. Full stop. I watched Sid and Nancy. I saw the example that was laid out before me.
Yeah.
And I could see that, like, I'm going to die from heroin. That's what's happening. It's all coming loose.
Right.
Like, I'm rattling apart. I'm losing control.
Yeah.
And I had only done whippets. I didn't even smoke. I had one time that one of my friends, out of a good intention, he just thought, man, you need pot so bad, dude. You're so tight wound.
Yeah.
I could appreciate. I'd like to tell him, you know, thanks for trying, evangelist of marijuana. I love you, dude. I love you today. I know you're still alive, and I care about you, and I just want to hug you.
Yeah.
He just was like super stoked. I think he'd gotten so much relief from his own sense of what was going on, and he just wanted me to try pot so bad. And so I took a pull on a joint behind a building. Like, he stopped the car.
Right.
He's like, you have to try this. And to me, I didn't feel terribly violated or anything.
Did it help?
No, because I didn't inhale it.
Oh, hilarious.
I did the Bill Clinton.
Yeah, right.
You know?
I did it, but I didn't inhale.
I wasn't interested in having like a perfect record or anything like that, but I just didn't want to get high on pot.
Sure.
And it was, and I thought, you know, that's for weak people. But boy, fast forward just a few months, and I'm doing whippets. One time we were in a car. The driver was doing whippets. I was in the back doing whippets, and I took this big hit of nitrous oxide, and all of a sudden, I'm across the car.
Oh, my gosh.
And we're all bumping around.
Yeah.
And nobody knew what happened. Because the driver and all of us had just taken a big hit.
Oofed it, dude.
And so we sort of just kept going in the lane, like regained the lane. And what had happened, we figured it out. It was another car had hit us.
Oh, shit.
We didn't hit them.
Dude.
They hit us.
Oofda.
And they never stopped, and we never stopped. We all just kept driving because they had hit us, and they did a hit and run.
Oh, my gosh, dude.
And we were the ones who should have hit them.
Right.
Now, that's a forensic analysis.
Yes.
That's not really that reliable, but that's the best we do. Another situation was we were all out skating, and we were in a car, and the cops stopped us, and they took the driver of the car to jail.
Oh, my gosh.
They opened the trunk of the car, and it was full of empty whipped cream charges. You know,
of course.
Just dropping everywhere. So they took the driver of the car to jail, and we all had to find somewhere to sleep that night. And we slept in like a garage, and the kind of like mayhem that was just going on. Like, it's difficult to talk about because these are real people, and they have their own story.
Yeah.
And it's difficult to talk about things like that because, and I might do it one day. I might write a book of, vignettes and like that. But the problem is, like, it was mayhem.
Yeah, just chaos, dude.
Bro.
Just chaos.
And my feelings about the people who were around me at that time have been seasoned with just decades of love and learning.
Right.
And, but yeah, so it was what it was, you know. So, but
I'm just interested in at some point, was there like in my life, I can pinpoint maybe 2 times where I was like, oh shit, this is not working anymore. Like, I've been trying so hard to figure it out. And this is just not working at all. Like,
every day.
just like
everything wasn't working until I was just
crisis.
saying, I remember I started to say, fuck it.
Yeah.
And it was like, oh, that's relief.
Yeah.
And I just was like that about everything.
Yeah, just like do whatever you want.
And I had some influential people in my life. I knew fewer people than most people knew.
Yeah.
Because I was kind of isolated. At my high school, there was 3,000 kids. But it wound up, like, I would have these people, and I would glom onto them and get everything. Like, I'd take on, like, their personality and their habits and things like that, trying to find a way that I wanted to be. I had a friend from California. That was a rare thing.
Yeah.
I had a friend from California. He was my age, my grade, and he skateboarded. And he rode a John Grigley deck. He loved it. And I was riding, I don't know what, but this was 8th grade. And he talked like a Californian. Mm-hmm. And I started talking like a Californian. And I loved it. Because it was like, forget all this stuff. My parents, oh my gosh, my parents must have been. My son, he went through what we call his scene phase, where he took on the people around him too.
The scene
and
phase.
When it was happening, I was like, I totally get this. I did this too. You know, like I, my sons are pushing their 30s now. And my youngest is in his 20s. My oldest 2 are in their 30s. 3 sons, and I got it. My parents endured it. But they were from the Northeast where it just wasn't happen. It just hadn't happened like that in their lives.
Right.
I think my mom might have had a sister who was a little bit like me, a difficult member of the family who was kicking against everything, and that's what I was doing. And I bet that she saw some of what was happening with me.
Right.
In that light, my dad had family members that also I shared similarities with because I don't think it's rare for young, frustrated men to feel angry and have homicidal ideations, which I had.
Right.
I don't think it's rare. And I think in our generation now, things have really, the dam has burst.
Yes. And
these homicidal ideations are good. But it was the year after I left school that the first kid shot a gun at a school bus.
Oofed.
Yeah. But what happened to me was this all culminated, this young adolescence culminated in me being really sensitized and deriving some conclusions. One of them is there's only one unifying experience in all of humanity, and it's death. Mm. Death ends the whole thing. That was a hanging dynamic. Because do you want to die sooner? Because and that the second thing that I had was that the greatest, one of the greatest disillusioning experiences of life is beauty. Mm. Beauty is pernicious in its disillusioning power because it makes you desire what you can never keep.
Yes.
Because death.
Mm.
And so in my 16th and 17th year, I was dressed all in black.
Right.
I was super over it all, and I had found this bulletproof shell. Never care about anyone or anything.
Right.
And recognize that all pleasure is fleeting. Everything ends when you die. And I was a terrible philosophical underpinning.
Yeah.
Accompanied with my gleaned understanding that we are all evil. And anyone that pretends otherwise is lying.
Yeah.
And the number one group of kids in my school that I hated for that were the church kids, the Christians. That zeroed down for me because the Christians were devoted to nothing. They were limp. They were devoted to being nice people as if that would ever get you anything. Right. I hated that.
Yeah.
They had no flavor.
Yes.
They weren't even vanilla. It was that was my perception. I'm sure I was wrong. We had kind of one punk rock Christian kid, but I didn't resonate with that kid. We never got tight.
Yeah.
I never resonated with that kid. I never had anyone who could. They sort of checked out off of me because I was so aggressive. And then so that was me at 16, and I started getting involved with, again, I started to play around with substance abuse.
Yep.
You know, you think like whippets aren't drugs as a joke, because what was happening there was I was experimenting in being out of control.
Yeah.
I was experimenting in forms of relief.
Yeah.
And one of the conclusions I was getting was, okay, well, you're probably going to die like Sid Vicious died because I can see it playing out in front of me.
Right.
And that kicked off a fairly quick sequence, about a 4-month period as far as I can kind of gather in recollection.
Sure.
A 4-month period of relatively high stakes, desperate crises. And I think we'll take it next episode. We'll talk about the kind of high stakes season. So
yes.
Episode 3 will be probably talking about like what happened next.
Yes.
And that should give the listeners a pretty
yes.
good view into what the deal is with what sort of person I am.
Yes.
And we got another hello from Russellville, Arkansas while we're talking.
Hi, Jason. Is that Jason? Is that his name?
Jason Robinson.
Hi,
yeah.
Jason.
Hey, Jason. I hope that we can continue to talk about these things. I've always loved talking to people who don't agree with me.
Yeah.
And I hope that we can, because look, I like, spoiler alert, I became a Christian, but I didn't become what I hated. I did wind up loving those kids, but I didn't wind up becoming the kind of Christian that was any other than the kind of Christian that Jesus was going to make of me. And it's been different. So we're going to sign out of this episode for a pee break. We're going to come back to it, and we'll release these in series and keep our podcasting going.
Yes.
So I'm going to stop the Podbean really quick here. No, I'll stop you guys first.
Yeah.
Thank you for joining us,
yes.
Podbean and Facebook Live.
Yes.
Thank you for the time you spent with us.
Absolutely.
And later today, we're going to go do some skateboarding and maybe do some clips. And Luke, thank you
of course,
for your questions and helping to
back.
tee this up. Luke's the one who thought we should do this.
Yeah, it's good.
So, and after this series, we're going to do a series on Luke. And then you can know who you're talking with.
Right.
And then So I talked a lot during these. He's going to talk a lot during the next part.
Yeah.
I bet we'll do five pieces on this.
Yes. It'll be good.
And then maybe we'll see. I really want to do an interview show. I just don't know how we're going to get from this little place to having, I guess, earmuff things on.
Like microphone.
And
like
a table.
How do you?
I don't know. And we don't want to learn. We don't want to learn from Joe Rogan. I don't leave Joe Rogan alone, man. He's busy.
Stuff,
We're going to learn how to do this ourselves.
Yeah, it'll be good.
And a special thanks to those of you who jump on the Podbean and get on the patron level with us. Right now, the patron level is covering the flipping $40 a month it costs for us to be on Podbean. And
goes to us.
that's ironical because we still can't get video onto Podbean so that we can use all of their stuff. They still haven't greeted us with a tech-friendly thing for iPad, iPhone.
Yeah.
We're going to stick with iPad, iPhone because we are not going to be able to be spending grands. This guy has a family. I have a family. We work. But this is what we think is going to be our job.
Yes.
Delusional? Always. For what it's worth.
For what it's worth.
It was CapmLew. Thanks, Luke.
Yes.
Talk to you soon.
Laters.